wanted you to buy the cage. The bird was free. So we stopped by the house. They sold us the parrot. It flew over to my shoulder, bit me on the neck, and I looked at it and I said, that hurt. And we became instant buds. It was just amazing. Somehow that was like, the test, if I could put up with him biting me on the neck, I was okay. So he became he or she. I never found out if it was a male or female. What male or female? I don't know. You gotta be. But in any case, it was a monk parrot, little green bird with a gray like hood, right? And it had about 500 words. My goodness. And the weirdest thing was it would sit on my shoulder and I'd walk around, and as I was walking, I could hear myself wheezing. And I still don't wheeze, actually, as I'm walking around. This was years ago. But so I'd be walking around and I'd hear me going, the bird was making that sound, and all I could figure is the guy who had died, and left this family with this parrot that they didn't like because it was mean and rotten to them, right? Had learned its words from living with this guy, and one of the things obviously was as he walked around he wheezed. So now I was wheezing as I was walking around, but it was an amazing experience, and I was absolutely convinced that the bird didn't just mimic, but actually used the right sounds in the appropriate occasions. It flew onto my wife's shoulder. She was cooking. She held up some mashed potatoes, and it nibbled some of the potatoes and looked at her and said, "It's very good." And she was just so impressed. Right? It later bit her on the neck. That wasn't good for her. She didn't like that, and the daughters didn't like it either, so turned out I was the only one in the house that it liked. It did poo on my shoulder all the time. You never got a, but how did I get into ego? I don't know how I got stuck in that. Do you think I ever go off track, don't stay on the topic?
It's philosophy.
That makes you interesting.
It is off track.
Oh, okay.
About social media.
So all ideas are social media, because I'm watching this parrot. And I have one myself. So I'm okay, this is AI. And so we can't believe any of this stuff. It used to be seeing is believing. And if you saw the video, you believed it. Now we're at the point where you can't believe anything you see. How distracting. How crazy. I've for years, of course, found it neat to be able to take images and merge them, and stuff, and you get weird things. But like the image I have on my webpage of me, that's actually a Rembrandt. However, so all ideas are derived from impressions. That seems true. And if we say, well, yeah, but some of them we got while we were still in the womb, that's still impressions. And the reason we can think that is because, well, at a certain stage, the fetus has earbuds, has eyes, can see light through. One of the scientific things they say is the two colors that make us feel psychologically comfortable are rose and green. Heard that? Yes? When that first happened, I noticed all the buildings that they built in town were all rose and green. A lot of rose and green buildings in town. And theoretically, rose, the color that's comforting to us while we're still in the womb is kind of a rose color. And perhaps evolutionarily, we always counted on the forest as a safe place. I don't know, So rose and green seem to be.
So those are our comfort colors.
Our comfort colors, yeah. You not heard that? Wonder why. Rose and green. Our favorite colors. Oof. Wow. So I'm behind the times. It's been updated now and they're saying blue. Interesting.
I just thought it was because the media told us that that was our favorite colors.
Well, I know there were enough people that believed them when they said that buildings were being made green and rose.
Aren't hospitals all made to be a common color? That's why they're all like light yellow, light green, turquoise.
Or else they easily see the blood on the wall.
Either.
No, I don't know.
Well, even Providence has so many different buildings that are different colors because they grew up in different stages of our community. Have you been to Providence?
Been everywhere.
You've been everywhere.
Been to see all the children. Had a liver transplant.
You've been everywhere. Well, hospitals used to be the only places where people would go to die. Like, you know, when we talk about rights, what rights ought we to have? Healthcare is a current right that we like to talk about, but actually, if you go back, they didn't have such a thing as healthcare. It hadn't been invented yet.
Healthcare hasn't been declared a right though, in America at least, right?
People want it though. A lot of people.
You still walk into any emergency room and be treated whether you're out here legally or you don't have health care or coverage.
Well, the thing is, when there's limited resources for a certain population in healthcare, like there's only so many organs to go around. So you have to start choosing the people who are most worthy of the organs. So what is the right to healthcare?
You said that once before.
Baseline healthcare, I would say baseline. Anything more like specialized or anything, you're right. You don't have-
Take 2 of these and call me in the morning.
Well, diagnosis is, or diagnosis.
And the person dies during the
that.
night. That's not what it was. You get lots of stories about that. Well, how did they get there? So, and his critique, by the way, of God, this is back to David Hume. David Hume also argues that God is merely extrapolation. We experience things like good things, good food, good companionship, good music, all sorts of things, and we think of God as the goodest thing. Just like the ontological argument that we, obviously he's going to be critical of that. But if we go and look up David Hume's book, so basically he uses this to point out that, hey, he's already criticized cause and effect. The 4 arguments that Thomas Aquinas uses to demonstrate God's existence are all cause and effect, based on, this happens, this happens, this happens, there must have been a first cause. And David Hume basically says, how do you know? How do you know there was a first cause? Well, oops, there you go. Well, we don't really know. That's pretty easy to see. So all the ones that base the argument that God exists on a prior, must be a prior cause, whether it's Aquinas or Aristotle, that doesn't prove that there was a Big Bang. If you're looking for proof that there's a Big Bang or whatever you think of as the beginning of time, etc., you're just estimating, you're guessing. So that's not a proof. And the argument from design, this is, only God could have made an eye. Well, actually, that's not proof either. So he pretty easily does away with those arguments. The ontological argument is not really something that he focuses on. He just thinks it's like a lot of people do, that it's just a word game. So it's not serious. It's not a serious one to deal with. You get some interesting connections here in the Wikipedia page to Richard Dawkins. And, yes.
I'm doing a paper on Richard Dawkins, and he is such a hater in his documentaries.
He's got a little gentler lately, but yeah, he was.
It's like he went to, I don't know if it's called Israel or Palestine, I don't want to be controversial, but he went to that area, and he literally asked a Muslim extremist, what do you think about 9/11 in Israel? That's such a dangerous situation to put yourself in.
What year was that he did that?
It was
Probably.
in The God Delusion.
Okay, so that's pretty long ago. That book was his book
It was
to try to
a
argue against.
2006 film.
Yeah. So that's when he and Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and Daniel Dennett formed the four anti-atheists. And what they wanted to do was destroy faith in religion because they blamed religion on 9/11. And they thought, what we need to do is make sure that you can't have people growing up believing in these non-scientific things. Just embarrass them, point out that this is absolutely ridiculous. Well, they had been at that really for quite some time. Christopher Hitchens died. Daniel Dennett now has died, and he was really the more serious philosopher in that. Because I liked how he sat in a TV interview with I can't think of his name right now, Charlie Rose, and said, well, if you define God as that than which nothing greater can be thought, of course God exists. That's the ontological argument. And the only real problem with that, because that's in a sense a proof, the only problem with that is if you don't think that's sufficient to define God, because you want God to have other characteristics, well, that doesn't help. It doesn't do anything for that. But to say that, that than which nothing greater can be thought doesn't exist, well, that's pretty dumb, actually. Because that than which nothing greater can be thought, by definition, is that than which nothing greater can be thought, and therefore it must exist. Otherwise, it's not that than which nothing greater can be thought. But yeah, so what is that? Is that something that I want to say goodnight to? Pray to? It's not really useful at all. Unless, of course, you were in an era where you believed that by definition that was also God, and by God you meant a whole bunch of other things. Doesn't work today, obviously. But in Daniel Dennett's interview with Charlie Rose, he claimed to be an atheist, although he grew up being Presbyterian and he loved all the hymns, and he still does the hymns on Christmas and everything. Because he loves all of that. But at the same time, no, I don't believe it. There's a God. And which kind of God did he mean? Well, he meant the kind of God that basically religious fundamentalists believe in. And he and the others were basically trying to stop people from growing up fundamentalists because their belief was that it was that kind of religious belief that led to the violence. So much of the violence they see in the world is based on religion. That's what they were trying to get rid of. And basically they ended up, after years of trying to do that, coming to realize that it wasn't going to work. It wasn't persuasive. They were only persuading the people that are already persuaded. and not changing the minds of other people.
Yeah, because there's like a tone problem when you're like, oh, everything you believe is stupid. Like, you have to like gradually introduce and place doubt. And
Well, there's an agenda.
slowly.
There's an agenda to my class. I basically laid that out by saying, that, the way we go through the history of philosophy, we might pick up, at certain points, you might feel like, oh, this is what I believe.